Anger is a visitor we all know too well. It arrives unannounced, pounding at our chest, quickening our heartbeat, and whispering words we do not yet understand. But what if I told you, my friends, that anger is not your enemy, that within its fire lies a message, a lesson, a call to rise higher than the moment? Today, let us not fear the flame that stirs within us, but learn to bend it, shape it, and use it to illuminate the path toward our strength, our voice, and our peace. For anger, when tamed with wisdom, can become the drumbeat of our courage. Anger is not the enemy that stalks your nights. It is a messenger that taps on your shoulder, insisting that you pay attention. Too often we mistake its sharpness for weakness in ourselves or others, and we strike before we listen. But anger is not a weapon to be wielded against those who surround us. It is a signal, a flame that rises to remind us that something within or around us needs to be seen, acknowledged, and honored. When we begin to listen to the quiet urgency beneath our fury, we discover the truth it holds, that we care, that our boundaries matter, that our spirit longs to be heard. The first step is to breathe, to slow the rush of fire in our veins, and allow ourselves the grace of reflection. In the stillness that follows, anger loses some of its sharpness and becomes clarity. It tells us, pay attention to what matters. Speak for yourself. Protect what is sacred. We do not have to lash out or punish to honor this truth. The power of anger lies not in its release against others, but in its transformation within ourselves. Every flare of rage holds a seed of wisdom, waiting for the patience to uncover it. We must remind ourselves that anger is fleeting, but the words and actions it prompts can leave permanent marks. When we wield it as a weapon, we wound not only those around us, but the very essence of who we wish to be. There is a dignity in choosing how we respond, in stepping back from the precipice of our own impulses. By treating anger as a signal instead of a sword, we reclaim our voice and our power. We learn to speak from a place of strength rather than desperation, of insight rather than reaction. Listening to anger also teaches compassion, first for ourselves, then for others. When we recognize that it arises from unmet needs, injustices, or fears, we can approach it with understanding instead of judgment. Compassion does not diminish the truth of our feelings, it strengthens it. We begin to see that our anger is a reflection of care, of values, of a heart that refuses to be silent in the face of what is wrong. And when we act from this place, our responses are measured, deliberate, and transformative. Finally, anger can become a guide, leading us to action that is both meaningful and enduring. When we let it signal the places where our attention is needed, we move with purpose rather than impulse. We shape the fire into light, into courage, into creativity that builds instead of destroys. And in doing so, we honor ourselves and those around us. We learn that the truest power is not in the intensity of our anger, but in the wisdom with which we listen to it and the love with which we act upon it. When anger rises within us, it demands to be heard, and yet, in its urgency, it often speaks before we are ready. Words can rush from our mouths like arrows, sharp and unrelenting, leaving wounds that linger far longer than the moment itself. We think speaking immediately will release the fire inside us, but sometimes the first words are the ones we regret the most. There is a quiet strength in pausing, in allowing the heart to settle before the tongue moves, in letting the storm pass long enough to see the sky again. Silence is not weakness, it is a sanctuary where clarity is born. The pause is a gift we give ourselves. In that moment, we do not have to react. We do not have to prove a point or defend a pride that is fragile and fleeting. We breathe, and in the rhythm of our breath, we find space to reflect. What is it that we truly feel? What is it that we truly wish to say? Anger often disguises deeper truths, hurt, disappointment, fear, or the longing for justice. By pausing, we uncover these truths and allow our responses to be guided not by impulse, but by wisdom. The world needs our voice, but it needs it to be steady, measured, and intentional. When we speak too quickly, we risk fracturing relationships we hold dear. Words spoken in the heat of rage are like fire on dry leaves. They ignite quickly and burn uncontrollably. A thoughtless sentence can echo long after the anger has faded, leaving behind only regret. But when we pause, we build a bridge instead of a wall. The space between anger and expression becomes a place where understanding can grow, where empathy can take root, and where communication can be honest without being destructive. In this quiet interval, we discover the power of discernment, the ability to choose our words like carefully planted seeds, knowing they can bloom rather than harm. Pausing also teaches us patience, a virtue that is rare and invaluable. The world often pushes us to react immediately, to prove ourselves, to strike before the moment passes. Yet the strength of the human spirit is measured not by the speed of its reactions, but by the depth of its thoughtfulness. The pause allows us to rise above the impulsive clamor and respond from a place of dignity. In doing so, we transform anger from a weapon into a guide, from a storm into a gentle, illuminating wind. Finally, when we cultivate the habit of pausing, we honor both ourselves and those around us. We choose words that heal, that inspire, that convey truth without cruelty. We remind ourselves that the greatest power lies not in speaking the loudest, but in speaking with presence, with intention, and with heart. And in that mindful silence, we discover freedom, the freedom to express, to connect, and to transform every moment of anger into an opportunity for growth and understanding. Anger is a fire that lives inside each of us, and it is neither shameful nor wrong to feel it. To feel is to be human, to exist in a world that tests our patience, our love, and our courage. Yet feeling is not the same as surrendering. Many allow anger to take the helm, steering their words, their actions, their very presence into places they later regret. But there is power in ownership, in standing before the storm of our own emotions and saying, I see you, I feel you, but you will not control me. When we acknowledge our anger without bowing to it, we reclaim our dignity and our freedom. Owning our feelings requires honesty, not only with the world, but with ourselves. We must name the fire, recognize its source, and trace its edges without flinching. Perhaps it is hurt that ignites it, betrayal that fans it, or injustice that fuels it. When we face these truths, we understand that anger is a messenger, not a master. It tells us what matters, what we care about, and where our boundaries lie. By confronting it squarely, we prevent it from silently eroding our peace and our relationships. There is no shame in anger, but there is harm in letting it speak for us unchecked. To not be owned by anger is to practice control with compassion. It is to feel fully without striking blindly, to express without destroying, and to act without leaving a trail of regret. Our relationships, fragile and precious, often bear the brunt of unbridled fury. Words said in haste, actions taken in heat, leave marks that even time struggles to erase. But when we own our feelings, we choose our responses. We respond with clarity, not chaos, with intention, not impulse. We transform anger from a consuming fire into a force that illuminates rather than consumes. This ownership also demands patience with ourselves. We are not machines, nor are we immune to the sparks of human emotion. We will stumble, we will shout, cry, and sometimes fail to control what burns inside. But owning our feelings is not about perfection. It is about awareness, reflection, and the commitment to rise again, each time a little wiser, a little steadier. Each moment of conscious choice, each pause before action builds resilience, shaping us into people whose strength is measured not by the absence of anger, but by the grace with which we navigate it. Finally, when we claim our feelings, we reclaim our power. We no longer allow anger to dictate the course of our lives. Instead, we allow it to teach us, guide us, and remind us of our capacity for courage, love, and wisdom. To own our feelings is to stand fully alive, fully human, and fully aware that we are the masters of our inner world. In this ownership lies liberation, a calm strength that no external circumstance can shake, and a light that shines quietly but powerfully for all who witness it. Anger is a fire that can either consume or illuminate. It is not meant to be carried silently in the shadows, nor is it meant to be unleashed recklessly. Its true purpose is to move us, to shake us awake, to demand that we no longer settle for what is unjust, unfair, or untrue. When we allow our anger to become a teacher instead of a tormentor, we transform it into a force that propels us forward. The energy it gives us is not wasted when it is guided with intention, for it can fuel courage, determination, and change. Too often, anger is met with resistance or denial. We feel it rise and immediately label it as something dangerous, something to be ashamed of. But anger itself carries a message. It tells us where we have been wronged, where we have been ignored, and where our spirit has been confined. By listening to this message, we can identify what needs to change in our lives, in our communities, in the world. It is a call to action, not destruction. Every great movement, every profound change begins with someone who felt deeply, burned with the need for justice, and chose to act. Action born of anger must be deliberate, not impulsive. It is not enough to shout or to rail against the moment. The power lies in choosing how that energy is expressed. We channel it through words that inspire, through deeds that uplift, through courage that stands firm, even when fear whispers. When we do this, anger becomes a fuel rather than a prison. It carries us toward solutions, toward reconciliation, and toward progress, rather than leaving us trapped in regret or guilt. The fire that once threatened to consume us becomes the very engine of our growth. Transforming anger into action also requires vision. We must see beyond the heat of the moment to the change we wish to create. It is not enough to burn with emotion. We must build with intention. Each step we take in clarity, each decision we make in alignment with our values, turns the raw energy of our frustration into a tangible force for good. Action grounded in purpose has a lasting impact. It ripples outward, touching others, inspiring them to find their own strength, their own courage, their own ways to rise. Ultimately, when we transform anger into action, we reclaim our power. We no longer allow the intensity of our emotions to dictate the course of our lives. Instead, we let our emotions guide us toward meaningful change. The fire inside us is no longer a burden, it is a companion, a spark that lights the path ahead. And in that light, we discover a profound truth, that anger, when harnessed with wisdom and heart, is not a force of destruction, but a call to live boldly, to speak clearly, and to act with courage. It becomes the quiet, unshakable power that moves mountains and shapes destinies. Anger is a fire that can harden the heart or melt it, depending on how we meet it. Too often, in the heat of our own frustration, we believe that strength is measured by how fiercely we resist or how loudly we strike. But true strength is quieter, subtler, and infinitely more powerful. It is the courage to respond with compassion, even when the world tempts us to respond with retaliation. Compassion does not make us weak. It allows us to rise above the noise, to see the pain in ourselves and in others, and to act with wisdom rather than impulse. When we respond with empathy, we begin to soften not only the hearts around us, but our own. Anger can create walls that isolate us, turning our energy inward and leaving us lonely in its echo. Compassion tears down those walls. It reminds us that every person carries their own struggles, their own wounds, their own reasons for the words they speak or the actions they take. By choosing to understand rather than condemn, we free ourselves from the corrosive weight of bitterness. We learn that strength is not in holding anger tightly, but in letting it guide us toward kindness, insight, and patience. Compassion requires courage, for it asks us to step into spaces that feel uncomfortable, to meet hostility with calm, to confront injustice with clarity, but without cruelty. It is easier to mirror anger, to give back what we receive, but those who rise above the instinct to lash out are the ones who inspire change. When we meet harshness with gentleness, when we answer impatience with patience, we plant seeds that may take years to grow, but will grow nevertheless. In this way, compassion becomes a quiet revolution, reshaping relationships, communities, and even the deepest corners of our own hearts. It is also a mirror, reflecting our humanity back to ourselves. When we cultivate empathy, we learn to recognize our own flaws and vulnerabilities with tenderness. We see that our anger is not shameful, that our mistakes are not failures, and that our capacity for forgiveness and understanding is a strength far greater than any victory won through hostility. Compassion teaches us that we are capable of holding both fire and grace, both rage and love, within the same heart. This duality does not weaken us, it makes us resilient, whole, and unshakable. Ultimately, choosing compassion in the midst of anger transforms both the moment and the person who carries it. It allows us to rise above the chaos, to act with purpose, and to connect with others on a level deeper than fear or pride ever could. In this practice, we discover that true strength is not the power to dominate, but the courage to understand, the bravery to forgive, and the wisdom to act with heart. When we embrace compassion as our strength, we find freedom, dignity, and the ability to turn even the hardest moments into opportunities for love, growth, and healing. When anger rises, it feels as if the world itself is closing in, as if the air has thickened and the heart beats too fast for reason to catch up. Yet within that storm lies a tool, simple and profound, often overlooked: the breath. A single deep inhale can steady the body, a deliberate exhale can quiet the mind, and in that rhythm we find a sanctuary from the tumult. Breath is the bridge between chaos and calm, the gentle reminder that we are larger than our emotions, that we are capable of choosing stillness even when everything around us demands reaction. Reflection walks hand in hand with breath. As we draw the air into our lungs, we draw insight into our souls. Anger is loud, but in the quiet spaces between inhales and exhales, we hear the truth it carries. What has ignited this fire? What need remains unmet? What boundary has been crossed? What injustice calls to us? The answers often do not come in shouts or fury, but in the soft pause that breath creates. It is in these moments of reflection that we reclaim our clarity, and with clarity comes choice. The choice of how to respond, how to speak, how to move forward without leaving a trail of regret. The power of breath and reflection is not just in the stillness, it is in the reclaiming of control. Anger can make us feel helpless, swept along by waves too strong to resist. But when we pause, inhale, and exhale, we remind ourselves that we are not at the mercy of our emotions. We are the captain of our vessel, the keeper of our own peace. This practice does not diminish the intensity of our feelings, rather, it honors them while preventing them from dictating our actions. It is a declaration that while life may stir storms within us, we have the ability to navigate them with grace. Breath also reconnects us to the body that carries us, to the heart that beats faithfully even when it trembles, and to the mind that can reason even when it is clouded. Reflection allows us to see the larger picture, to measure the impact of our words and deeds, and to discern what is truly worth our energy. When we cultivate this practice, anger becomes a messenger instead of a tyrant, and our responses become acts of intention rather than reaction. Through breath and reflection, we transform moments of chaos into moments of insight, tension into understanding, and frustration into growth. Ultimately, The power of breath and reflection teaches us that calm is never outside of us. It has always been within. No matter the intensity of our anger, we have the ability to step back, to listen, to feel, and to act from a place of wisdom rather than impulse. Each breath becomes a lifeline, each moment of reflection a guide, leading us toward peace, clarity, and the courage to respond with intention. In embracing this simple yet profound practice, we discover that even in the heat of anger, we are capable of calm, capable of choice, and capable of transforming fire into light. Forgiveness is a quiet revolution that begins within the heart. It is not something we do for others, it is something we do for ourselves. To forgive is not to condone what has been done, nor is it to erase the memory of pain. It is to release the weight that chains us, to step out of the prison built by anger and resentment, and to reclaim the freedom that belongs to us by birth. Many believe that holding on to bitterness is a form of power, but true power lies in the courage to let go, in the bravery to choose peace over pride, and in the grace to walk forward unburdened. Anger often convinces us that clinging to hurt is strength, that by remembering the injustice, we somehow preserve our dignity. But the opposite is true. The heart that refuses to forgive carries a wound like a stone in its chest, heavy and cold. Every thought of revenge, every moment spent replaying the offense, saps energy and joy, leaving little room for growth or love. Forgiveness is the act of lifting that stone, of allowing ourselves to breathe freely once more. It does not erase what happened, but it transforms its meaning, turning suffering into insight, rage into understanding, and pain into resilience. To forgive is to honor our own humanity. It is to recognize that to err is to be human for ourselves and for others. This does not mean we accept abuse, injustice, or cruelty. It means we refuse to let those actions define the rest of our lives. Forgiveness is a reclamation of dignity, a declaration that no one has the power to imprison our hearts indefinitely. It is an act of self-respect, a statement that we will not allow bitterness to dictate our days or cloud our vision. When we forgive, we rise above the circumstances that seek to diminish us, and we reclaim the authority to shape our own lives. Forgiveness also transforms relationships, though not always in the ways we expect. Sometimes it heals the bonds between people. Sometimes it simply allows us to move forward without carrying the burden of resentment. It frees us to engage with the world with clarity and compassion, to love without fear, and to embrace life with an open heart. In forgiving, we cultivate inner peace that is impervious to circumstance, a strength that cannot be taken away, and a calm that no storm can shake. Ultimately, forgiveness liberates because it reminds us that our lives belong to us and us alone. It allows us to release the past, step into the present, and move toward a future unshackled by anger. In choosing to forgive, we choose freedom, courage, and dignity. We honor our own power to rise above hurt and to live fully, unburdened by what has been done. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the quiet, unyielding strength that restores the soul and illuminates the path ahead, showing us that the heart can heal, the spirit can soar, and life can be lived with grace. Anger is a fire that burns brightly and often painfully, but within its flames lies a lesson waiting to be discovered. Each flare of frustration, each moment of fury, carries a message for those willing to look beyond the heat and see the truth beneath. The fire of anger is not meant to consume us entirely. It is meant to illuminate the parts of ourselves and our lives that require attention, understanding, and growth. When we learn from the fire, we begin to see that even our fiercest emotions have wisdom to offer, if only we pause long enough to receive it. Too often, we wish anger would simply disappear, as if extinguishing the flame would make us whole. But in avoiding it, we deny ourselves the chance to grow. The fire tells us where our boundaries have been crossed, where our hearts have been hurt and where injustice has lingered too long. It shows us what we value most and what we refuse to compromise. By examining the lessons within anger, we begin to understand not only the world around us, but the world inside us, our triggers, our vulnerabilities, and our strengths. The fire becomes a teacher, guiding us towards self-awareness and clarity. Learning from the fire requires courage and honesty. It asks that we look unflinchingly at our own reactions, our own words, and our own choices. Anger can be a mirror, reflecting both the parts of ourselves we love and the parts we wish to change. When we study its reflection, we see patterns that may have gone unnoticed, behaviors that may harm, and opportunities to act differently in the future. Each moment of anger carries a question. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? What can I do to respond rather than react? These questions, when answered with patience and introspection, turn chaos into insight and impulsive fire into thoughtful action. The lessons within anger also teach empathy. When we examine our own fire, we realize that others experience the same intensity, the same struggles, and the same moments of vulnerability. The fire teaches us to approach others with understanding rather than judgment, to recognize that their anger is often a signal rather than an attack. In learning from the fire, we grow in compassion, patience, and wisdom. We begin to see that anger, like all emotions, is a part of the human experience, a guide pointing toward areas where healing, dialogue, or change is needed. Ultimately, learning from the fire transforms the way we live. Anger no longer controls us. Instead, it informs us. It reminds us to act with awareness, to speak with intention, and to live with courage. Each flare of frustration becomes an opportunity for growth. Each moment of rage, a chance to refine our character and strengthen our spirit. The fire, once feared, becomes an ally, a teacher that lights the path toward understanding, resilience, and a life lived with greater wisdom. In embracing the lessons of anger, we discover that even the hottest flames can illuminate our way, guiding us toward clarity, strength, and the beauty of transformation. Rage may roar within us, threatening to drown every thought, every intention, every whisper of reason. It is loud, insistent, and demanding, and it tempts us to lash out, to strike with words or actions that we will later regret. Yet, within that fire lies another force, one far stronger than the storm of anger itself, our voice. The voice is patient, deliberate, and enduring. It carries truth beyond the moment, a clarity that rage alone can never achieve. When we choose to speak from our voice rather than from our fury, we claim a power that is both gentle and unshakable, a power that can change hearts, minds, and even the world. Rage is fleeting, but the voice endures. Words born in anger often scorch the earth they touch, leaving only regret and division in their wake. The voice, when cultivated with care and intention, reaches farther, lasting longer than the heat of a moment. To speak from this place requires restraint, courage, and self-awareness. It asks us to honor our feelings without letting them dominate our expression. It teaches us that our truth is more powerful when delivered with clarity, honesty, and respect, rather than force. The world listens not to the loudest cry, but to the voice that speaks with conviction, wisdom, and heart. Using our voice instead of rage allows us to transform conflict into communication. It opens doors rather than slamming them shut, builds bridges rather than walls, and invites understanding where anger invites only defense. Our voice carries our story, our values, and our vision for the world we wish to see. When we choose it over hostility, we assert not only our presence, but our purpose. We demonstrate that we are more than our impulses, more than our frustrations, and more than the moments that threaten to overwhelm us. The voice becomes a beacon, guiding others toward empathy, reflection, and collaboration. Speaking from the voice also restores our dignity. Anger often clouds our judgment, causing us to act in ways that betray our own standards and ideals. The voice, however, aligns our words with our integrity. It is the expression of a mind that has reflected, a heart that has felt deeply, and a spirit that refuses to be defined by temporary fury. When we speak with clarity, we reclaim authority over ourselves, our choices, and our destiny. In doing so, we remind ourselves and others that true strength lies not in force, but in the courage to express truth thoughtfully, powerfully, and authentically. Ultimately, the voice is the instrument of transformation. It transcends the fleeting intensity of rage and creates lasting impact. It allows us to be heard, respected, and remembered for our wisdom rather than our outbursts. When we cultivate this practice, anger becomes a teacher, our voice becomes the messenger, and the world listens, not because we shout, but because we speak from the place where power, compassion, and truth converge. In the quiet strength of our voice, we discover that it is far greater than any moment of rage, far deeper than any frustration, and far more enduring than any fleeting anger. It is our legacy, our gift, and our light.